Maria glanced at the clock on her desk. It read 9:17 p.m. She rubbed her tired eyes, feeling the weight of exhaustion pressing down. The office was silent except for the soft hum of fluorescent lights and her own typing. She had stayed late every night for the past month, sacrificing weekends, family dinners, and precious sleep to secure the prestigious Hamilton account. This project was more than just work. It represented her chance at validation after years of feeling invisible, both at home and at work. Earlier that day, Daniel had stopped by her cubicle. His crisp white shirt, always perfectly ironed, and carefully chosen words were calculated yet reassuring. "Maria, we're counting on you," Daniel had said with his signature charm. "But remember, we're all in this together. This win will be great for the whole team." Maria had smiled, nodding politely, though the comment lingered, unsettling her in ways she couldn't quite articulate. In the quiet solitude of the empty office, Maria reviewed her presentation meticulously one final time. Charts and reports filled her screen, each figure checked and rechecked. She felt a rush of pride as she finalized the document, confident in her meticulous preparations. The next morning, adrenaline masked her exhaustion as she prepared to present. Entering the meeting room early, Maria arranged printed reports carefully at each seat. The executives, including Mr. Hamilton himself, soon arrived. Maria began her presentation, nervous at first, but quickly finding her rhythm. She saw their approving nods, felt the warmth of their genuine interest. By the end, applause filled the room. She had done it. But as the applause died down, Daniel stood up gracefully from his chair, flashing his polished smile toward Mr. Hamilton. "Thank you, everyone," Daniel said warmly. "As Maria has demonstrated, this team is exceptional. I personally oversaw the project's strategy and development from the start, and I can confidently say we've surpassed expectations. That's exactly what good team players do, and Maria certainly is one." Maria's heart dropped. She stared blankly, words stuck in her throat as the room murmured their agreement. Daniel absorbed their praise effortlessly, leaving Maria feeling invisible once more. That evening, alone at her kitchen table, Maria replayed Daniel's words over and over. Her hands trembled with quiet indignation. She had stayed silent today, absorbing the betrayal with practiced composure. But as she stared into her cold cup of tea, Maria felt something new stir inside, a fierce resolve she'd never known. In the days following the meeting, Maria struggled to hide her disappointment and frustration. Each congratulatory remark aimed at Daniel stung deeply. She found herself avoiding conversations, choosing to quietly observe interactions between colleagues, searching for any sign that someone else saw through Daniel's polished facade. One morning, as she stood waiting at the coffee machine, lost in thought, Maria felt a gentle touch on her shoulder. Turning sharply, she met the empathetic eyes of Claire Bennett, a younger but equally dedicated project coordinator. "Hey," Claire said softly, glancing around before continuing. "I noticed how Daniel spoke during the Hamilton presentation. That didn't sit right with me. Everyone in this office knows how much you poured into that project." Maria felt a swell of relief at Claire's acknowledgement. Her shoulders relaxed slightly, comforted by the idea that someone else saw what had happened. Still cautious, Maria whispered, "I thought maybe I was overreacting." "Daniel's always been convincing." Claire's expression darkened slightly as she replied, "Daniel has a reputation. You aren't the first to experience this, but most people stay quiet to protect their jobs. It's easier that way." Maria's thoughts swirled. Her career had become the backbone of her rebuilt identity after her divorce. Risking it terrified her. Yet, Claire's support was a beacon, illuminating possibilities Maria hadn't dared consider. "Thank you, Claire," Maria finally murmured, sincerity clear in her eyes. It helps knowing someone understands. Over the next few days, Maria discreetly observed Daniel more closely. The charisma she once admired now appeared strategic, calculated, and insincere. She noticed how Daniel often spent long lunches with senior executives, always conveniently returning to claim accomplishments that others painstakingly built. It became evident. His ambition had made him an expert at manipulating perception. One afternoon, while Daniel was out for yet another lengthy meeting, Maria gathered her courage and quietly entered his office, hoping to uncover anything that might validate her growing suspicions. Carefully closing the door behind her, she quickly scanned the neatly organized space. On Daniel's desk, partially concealed beneath files, was an opened notebook. Her heart racing, Maria leaned forward to read a hastily scribbled note. Ensure Hamilton knows I'm personally involved. Need him to believe I directed every step. Maria will handle details. Credit stays with me. Maria stepped back, her breath quickening. The cold, explicit intent written in Daniel's hand filled her with both shock and determination. Snapping a discreet photo of the note with trembling hands, she quickly left the office, her mind racing with next steps. Back at her desk, Maria glanced at Claire across the room. Their eyes briefly met, and Maria nodded slightly. For the first time in years, Maria felt truly awake, ready to fight back. Maria spent several sleepless nights contemplating her next move. Her mind wrestled continuously with uncertainty. Should she expose Daniel directly, risking the stability she'd painstakingly rebuilt? Or should she bide her time, accumulating more evidence to present an irrefutable case? One afternoon, while Maria was quietly sorting through project files, Claire approached her desk discreetly. "Maria, there's something you should know," Claire whispered urgently. Maria sensed the gravity in Claire's tone and nodded for her to continue. "I've heard Daniel is maneuvering behind the scenes," Claire explained cautiously. "He told HR that the Hamilton account workload might have been too demanding for you, suggesting subtly that you need less responsibility." Maria felt a chill run through her veins. This wasn't just about stolen credit anymore. Daniel was actively undermining her professional standing. Anger mingled with anxiety, sharpening Maria's resolve. She realized she needed allies within the company, people who could vouch for her work ethic and capability. Claire, seeing Maria's distress, quickly added, "You have more supporters than you think. People see through Daniel. They're just afraid. If you lead, others might follow." Encouraged by Claire's words, Maria began discreetly reconnecting with colleagues she'd helped over the years, gauging their sentiments and carefully hinting at her situation. To her relief, she discovered that Claire was right. Many had similar experiences or suspicions regarding Daniel, but had chosen silence for fear of retaliation. Maria then arranged a private lunch meeting with Henry Patel, a senior manager known for his integrity. Nervous but determined, she cautiously shared her experience with Daniel, carefully avoiding emotional language to maintain credibility. Henry listened intently, his expression growing increasingly serious. "You're not the first to share concerns about Daniel," Henry admitted quietly, "but you're the first who's come forward with tangible proof." Surprised by Henry's openness, Maria showed him the photograph she'd taken of Daniel's notebook. Henry examined it carefully, his jaw tightening. "This is significant," Henry murmured thoughtfully, "but we'll need to approach this strategically. Daniel has influence, and any move we make needs to leave no room for doubt." Maria nodded, her heart lighter for the first time in weeks, reassured that someone with authority now stood beside her. "Maria," Henry continued gently, "prepare yourself." Daniel won't go quietly. Returning to her desk, Maria felt both reassured and vulnerable. She had taken the first crucial step. Now she needed to remain patient and vigilant, mindful that Daniel's manipulation would likely escalate when threatened. As she glanced toward Daniel's office, noticing his charismatic laugh echo through the corridor, Maria steeled herself, knowing her real battle had only just begun. In the weeks following Maria's conversation with Henry, an unsettling calm settled over the office. Maria maintained her composure outwardly, but felt tension simmering beneath every interaction. Daniel appeared unaware of her secret meetings, continuing his charismatic facade. But Maria sensed an unspoken hostility. His smiles toward her were sharper, his praise hollow. One afternoon, Maria was preparing a routine report when Daniel approached her desk unexpectedly. She tensed but maintained a polite smile. "Maria, do you have a moment?" Daniel asked smoothly, his voice deceptively friendly. Maria nodded, following him reluctantly to his office. Once seated, Daniel leaned forward slightly, fixing her with an intense gaze. "I've been reviewing recent workloads, and I'm concerned you've been overwhelmed lately. Perhaps we should shift some responsibilities to ease your stress." Maria's stomach twisted. Daniel was subtly undermining her again, trying to position himself as concerned, masking his true intentions. "I appreciate the thought, Daniel," Maria responded calmly, maintaining direct eye contact. "But I'm managing just fine." Daniel paused briefly, clearly surprised by her firm response. "Very well," he finally replied, his tone colder than before. "But remember, we're all about teamwork here. We succeed together or not at all." Returning to her desk, Maria felt rattled. Her brief confidence gave way to doubts. Was Daniel sensing her plans? She realized the urgency of their situation. Later that day, Maria privately met with Henry and Claire in a quiet cafe, away from the office's prying eyes. "Daniel approached me today," Maria began cautiously, recounting their conversation. Henry nodded seriously. "He's testing your resolve. Daniel thrives by sowing doubt. We must move carefully but decisively." Claire leaned forward, determination clear in her expression. "We can't wait much longer. He's already poisoning your reputation." Henry proposed an idea. "Maria, we have a performance review cycle coming up. If we present our evidence clearly during that process, it could significantly reduce his leverage. The management team respects formal reviews, and they'll listen carefully." Maria considered this carefully. "But won't Daniel anticipate that? What if he discredits me before we reach the review?" "That's a risk," Henry admitted. "But we can mitigate it by gathering testimonials from your colleagues. If others speak up, Daniel can't dismiss everything as personal bias." The trio agreed to discreetly approach colleagues who had privately expressed doubts about Daniel's behavior. Claire volunteered eagerly, her connections and friendly demeanor making her an ideal liaison. Returning home that evening, Maria felt drained, yet resolute. Her phone vibrated softly, a message from Claire. "Just spoke with 3 colleagues, ready to support you." Maria exhaled, comforted by the solidarity beginning to form around her. Yet she remained cautious, acutely aware that Daniel, sensing any threat, could become even more dangerous. The days leading up to the performance review brought a tense stillness to the office. To an outsider, Crestview Marketing Solutions buzzed along in its usual rhythm. Laughter near the coffee machine, keyboard clicks echoing through cubicles. But for Maria, every moment felt like walking a tightrope. Claire had made quiet progress, collecting input from trusted coworkers. "Lisa in finance said she remembers you doing all the Hamilton projections personally," Claire shared during one of their morning coffee breaks. "She's willing to write a statement for the review." Maria felt a cautious hope. With each new supporter, her confidence grew. But so did the shadow of Daniel's suspicion. He had started hovering more frequently, asking Maria to send him drafts of reports she used to handle independently, casually dropping into conversations she was having with other employees. His smile never left his face, but there was a new edge in his eyes. Then, on a rainy Tuesday morning, Daniel called an all-team meeting. I want to take a moment, he began, to talk about team dynamics. We've had some incredible wins recently, and that's thanks to our ability to work as one cohesive unit, not individuals chasing personal accolades. Maria felt her stomach knot. She could feel eyes turning subtly toward her. The message was clear. There's no place here for personal agendas, Daniel concluded with a gracious smile. Let's remember why we're here. Afterward, Claire found Maria in the break room. He's trying to turn the team against you. That was a warning. I know, Maria said quietly. He's nervous. That means what we're doing is working. Later that afternoon, Henry called Maria into his office. We've got 7 written testimonials, including one from your former manager. They're all ready to be submitted with your performance file. I'll attach them discreetly. Maria's eyes welled with emotion. For so long, she had kept her head down, enduring, surviving. Now she felt seen. There's something else, Henry added. HR has asked managers to prepare preliminary feedback ahead of formal reviews. Daniel submitted yours yesterday. I wasn't supposed to see it, but I did. Maria braced herself. It's veiled, but damaging. He called you well-meaning but overwhelmed, and said you've been struggling to keep up with cross-functional demands. It's worded just vaguely enough to seem objective. Maria's heart pounded. Can we counter it? Henry nodded. Yes, but this makes our timing critical. I want you to write a personal statement about the Hamilton account. Keep it factual, calm, and detailed. We'll submit it with the evidence. Let your work speak louder than emotion. Maria stayed late that night, typing with trembling fingers. She recounted long evenings spent alone in the office, the metrics she'd compiled, the presentations she'd rehearsed endlessly. No embellishments, just the truth. When she finished, she read it once, then again, then closed her eyes and clicked send. The battle lines were drawn. The days that followed were agonizingly quiet. Maria checked her inbox obsessively, each unopened email subject line causing her pulse to quicken. Her personal statement and supporting documents had been submitted. HR had acknowledged receipt, but offered no comments. Nothing from Daniel either, and that was more unnerving than if he had stormed her desk in protest. Claire stayed close, sensing the emotional strain. He's probably trying to assess how much damage you've really done, she said one afternoon. He's calculating. Maria nodded, but said nothing. Her anxiety crept into her evenings. Sleep became fragmented. She would lie awake thinking about the decades she'd given to the company, the pride, the loyalty. Would it matter in the end? Or would Daniel's polished lies win again? Finally, a week later, Maria was called into HR. She entered the room with her shoulders tense, but her head held high. Waiting for her was Helen Marks, the HR director, an experienced, perceptive woman who had always maintained a strict neutrality. Next to her sat Henry, silent but steady. Maria, Helen began, we've completed the review of your performance documentation, including your personal statement and peer testimonials. I want to start by acknowledging the professionalism and clarity of what you submitted. Maria blinked, unsure how to interpret the tone. It was surprising, Helen continued, to contrast this evidence with Mr. Hartley's preliminary feedback. The discrepancy is significant. Henry leaned forward slightly. We believe Maria's documentation shows a consistent pattern of contributions that were minimized or redirected by her manager. Helen nodded. We've also reached out to some of the peers listed in your file. The feedback was consistent and honest. Maria, it's clear you were the driving force behind the Hamilton success. Maria felt emotion rising in her chest, but she kept her composure. Helen continued, That said, we can't act solely on this review. There will be a formal process. Mr. Hartley will be interviewed. We'll give him an opportunity to respond to the claims. But your record stands, and we will formally amend your performance report. Maria exhaled, the tension in her chest easing slightly. "Thank you," she said softly. As she stood to leave, Helen added, "You've shown remarkable restraint and professionalism. That matters here. No matter what happens with Daniel, your voice has been heard." Outside the HR office, Henry smiled. "You've done the hardest part, Maria." "I'm not sure," she said. "I think the hardest part is still coming. He won't go down quietly." And she was right. The very next day, Daniel sent a mass email congratulating the team on a shared victory over the last quarter, subtly implying leadership over Maria's project once again. More concerning, he scheduled a private one-on-one meeting with her, marked urgent. Claire's message came quickly. "He's trying something. Be ready." Maria sat at her desk, hands resting gently on her keyboard. The meeting was in 15 minutes. She stared at the calendar notification on her screen, then slowly stood up. This time, she wouldn't walk in uncertain. She wouldn't sit quietly. Whatever happened in that room next, she would not leave it feeling small. The hallway to Daniel's office felt longer than usual. Maria's heels echoed on the tile as she walked with steady steps, rehearsing nothing. She had no script, no plan to outmaneuver, only a quiet, solid intention to speak the truth and meet whatever came without flinching. Daniel greeted her with a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "Maria, come in." She sat without invitation. He closed the door and leaned against his desk, arms crossed. "We haven't really had a chance to talk lately. I sense some tension." Maria looked at him directly. "Yes, there is tension." Daniel tilted his head, as though amused. "You've always been such a hard worker, Maria, and I respect that. But lately, there's been a change in tone. Submissions to HR, emails flying around, people whispering. It's not very team-like." Maria stayed silent, forcing him to continue. "I want to remind you," he said, his voice lowering, "that optics matter here. Loyalty matters. And if this continues, you might be creating a narrative about yourself that you won't be able to walk back." "Are you threatening me?" Maria asked calmly. "No," he said smoothly. "I'm advising you. We both know how these things work. You stir up too much drama, and suddenly you're seen as the problem, not the victim." Maria took a breath. "The truth doesn't need decoration. I'm not here to play games. I've documented what I needed to. I've spoken to the people I trust. If you're worried, maybe it's not because of what I've done, but what you have." Daniel's smile faltered. "You think the company's going to side with you? I've been shaping the vision here for years. I know how to protect my work, Maria. Do you?" She stood. "That's the difference between us, Daniel. You protect your image. I protect the truth." Before she turned to leave, she added, "You should know HR is scheduling your interview. I assume you've prepared your version. Just be sure it matches your notes." Daniel didn't reply. Outside, Claire was waiting in the corridor. She looked at Maria's face and said nothing, just gave her a small nod. The hallway was quiet, but Maria felt something loud in her chest. Peace. 2 days later, word spread quietly that Daniel had been seen in a closed-door meeting with HR for over 2 hours. Then another. Whispers circulated. Something was shifting. By the end of the week, Henry pulled Maria aside. HR's compiling their findings. Several other staff came forward during the inquiry. "Patterns matched your account. They're taking it seriously." Maria exhaled. A long breath held for too long. "And Daniel? He's been advised to work from home pending conclusion. It's not official yet, but there's momentum." That night, Maria sat at her kitchen table, tea cooling beside her. Not long ago, she had sat there stunned by betrayal. Now she sat with something else. Power. The following Monday arrived with an unexpected calm. Daniel's absence was noticeable. His office door remained closed, lights off. Conversations in the office turned quieter when Maria passed, not with avoidance, but with respect. People smiled more, nodded. Small gestures, but significant. Something had shifted. Claire brought coffee to Maria's desk. You should know, Helen from HR sent a company-wide email. The wording was formal, but she said there would be organizational changes based on internal reviews. Maria's hands trembled slightly as she sipped her drink. Later that day, she was called into a meeting, not with HR this time, but with Crestview's Director of Operations, Robert King. He was a composed man in his early 60s, known for few words and sharp insight. As Maria entered, he stood to greet her, a gesture that surprised her. "Maria," he said, "please sit." He opened a folder before him, but didn't look down at it. Instead, his gaze stayed on her. "First, thank you for your patience and for your integrity." Maria remained silent, unsure what was coming. "The investigation into Mr. Hartley concluded this morning," he continued. "The evidence, yours and others, painted a clear picture of sustained misrepresentation and abuse of position. He's been relieved of his duties, effective immediately. His departure is being handled as a resignation for legal reasons." Maria swallowed hard. It was done. No dramatic announcement, no office scandal, just quiet closure. It was more powerful that way. Robert continued, "I also want to talk to you about your next step. Your work on the Hamilton account wasn't just impressive. It was the foundation of one of our biggest wins this year. We want to offer you a leadership role, project director for the new expansion initiative." Maria blinked. He smiled. "Take time to consider it. But you've earned more than just recognition. You've earned trust." As she walked back to her desk, a strange feeling settled in her chest. Not elation, not relief. Something quieter, a calm pride. She didn't need applause, just the knowledge that she had endured and acted. That evening, Claire joined her for dinner at a quiet Italian cafe. The air was warm, the conversation lighter than it had been in weeks. "So," Claire said, raising her glass, "to peace? Or to new beginnings?" Maria smiled gently. "To knowing your worth, and to never letting someone take it from you again." Maria sat at her dining table again, this time with a folder spread open beside her tea. Inside were the details of the expansion initiative. Timelines, budgets, personnel projections. The offer was generous. The trust it symbolized even more so. But something deep inside kept her cautious. She wasn't afraid of the work. She had done harder things, often without recognition. What unsettled her was the possibility of slowly becoming the very thing she had stood against, someone too comfortable with power, too far removed from the quiet voices that often went unheard. The next morning, Maria met with Henry. They walked through the park near the office. Her idea. She needed air. "Are you hesitating?" he asked gently. Maria exhaled. "I want to say yes, but I want to mean it fully, not out of pride, not out of revenge, because it's right." Henry smiled. "That's exactly why you're being offered the role. People want to follow someone who remembers what it's like to be unseen." Back at the office, things were different. Claire had moved into Maria's old role, and the team dynamic felt softer. Meetings were more open, ideas welcomed without hierarchy. Maria noticed quiet employees like Ben, who rarely spoke under Daniel, beginning to raise their hands. Still, not everything was seamless. On Thursday, a new junior analyst, Aaron, approached Maria privately. "I just wanted to say," Aaron said, nervous, "that what you did, standing up like that, it mattered. To more of us than you know." Maria smiled, then caught the hesitation in Aaron's eyes. "But?" she prompted. Aaron looked down. "Some people are saying you got lucky, that it was just office politics, And now you're benefiting from it. I'm sorry, I just thought you should know. It stung. But Maria nodded. Thank you for being honest. That's how we change things, from the inside out. Later that evening, Maria wrote in her old leather-bound journal, a habit she had revived in recent weeks. Leadership is not about stepping up alone. It's about reaching back, listening, protecting the truth before protecting your position. By Friday, she had made her decision. She walked into Robert King's office with quiet confidence. I accept the offer, she said, but I want to build a team around values, not just results. And I want mentoring included in our goals. Robert looked pleased. I thought you might say that. Her first official meeting as project directors was set for Monday, and as she walked through the corridors, ones she used to tread with fear, Maria felt something she hadn't in a long time. She belonged here. Not because she won a battle, but because she never let it define her. The first Monday in her new role began not with a speech, but with a walk. Maria arrived early, quietly circulating through the office. She paused by desks, asked about projects, remembered names. She didn't need to declare authority. It was in the way she listened. When the team gathered in the conference room, some eyes were expectant, others hesitant. Maria stood at the head of the table, not behind it. I won't pretend this transition has been easy, for any of us, she began. But we're not here to rewrite the past. We're here to build something better. Together. She spoke simply. No corporate jargon, no sweeping promises. Just a clear vision, collaborative teams, ethical leadership, space for ideas. And one policy she introduced personally, mentorship pairings across departments, rotated quarterly. Everyone has something to teach, she said, and everyone has something to learn. Over the next few weeks, Maria's leadership found its rhythm. She handled challenges with a blend of logic and empathy, stepping in firmly when needed, but always seeking understanding before judgment. Not everyone embraced her right away. A senior strategist, Mark, seemed especially cold. I don't think we need to change everything, he said in a meeting. Some of us were doing just fine. Maria didn't argue. She met with him privately instead. I'm not here to erase your work, she said. I'm here to make sure people like Aaron don't leave the way others did. Unnoticed. Over time, even Mark's resistance softened. What surprised Maria most, though, was how often younger staff sought her out. Not just for approval, but for guidance. Claire, now thriving in her expanded role, often lingered after meetings, discussing long-term goals and workplace dynamics. You've changed how I see myself, she said once. You made it okay to take up space. One afternoon, Maria received an envelope marked confidential. Inside was a handwritten note from Helen in HER. Maria, I've been in this field a long time. What you did, how you handled everything, it was rare. You reminded this company of what leadership should look like. Thank you. The note stayed tucked in Maria's drawer, unopened but often reread. On the final Friday of the quarter, Maria stood alone in the office kitchen, making tea. A new intern passed by and stopped. You're Maria, right? The one who… She hesitated. Everyone here respects you. They say you stood up for people. Maria smiled softly. Sometimes standing up just means staying standing when someone tries to push you down. As the intern walked away, Maria looked out the window. The city pulsed below. Her heart was calm. She didn't win by fighting Daniel. She won by choosing truth when silence was easier. And now, her story lived not in whispers, but in the quiet strength she carried forward.